And we are live. Thank you for tuning in to the Foraging Truth radio podcast. Chuck and I are in the studio here, and we're going to be covering a couple of topics that you're definitely going to want to hear about. But first, make sure that you like and share this video with your friends. Help us get the word out to everyone about foraging, about the creation, everything that's in it, and most importantly, about the Creator, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So now, without further ado, let's get into the main topic that we're going to start with today. And that's going to be, there's a really crazy situation going on in Tennessee. It's in the news. I'm sure you've heard about it. It has to do with a police officer engaging in some adult relations with other officers. And it's a mess. It's a terrible situation. It's no doubt hurting families. It's certainly not the kind of publicity that you would want for yourself or for your employer or anything like that. And it's definitely causing a lot of problems. I mean, how many kids are being affected by this? How many spouses are being affected by this? It's terrible, and I don't even want to say the names of the people involved because I don't want to give them any more publicity than they've already gotten. But if you know, you know. And I don't know, Chuck, it just seems like this kind of immorality is in the news, and it becomes such a spectacle that they want to know everything about it. They want to spend time thinking about it. And you just have to wonder why. I mean, what's your take on this?
Well, I mean, if people are that narrow-minded nowadays that they would think that those are the only people that are doing that kind of stuff, and that it's like, oh, look at them, oh, look at them. Well, I'm sure that if they sit back and just think for 5 minutes, they're going to think of people that have done that in their workplace. And I don't think,
Right.
I think it's just a shadow of what the world is becoming. I mean, and what it becoming is a gentle term as well, because I mean we can go back through history and see how civilizations fall, and I believe the civilization that we've come to know here in America is being set up for a fall, because the first thing you want to do is destroy the family. If you can destroy the family, then you're hitting bedrock in society. So, with saying that, I mean, we can see the degradation of the family today. I mean, I'm sure you can see it.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, kids suffer whenever families break apart, and no doubt that's what's going to happen in some of these cases. I mean, how could it not? And kids need a mother and a father, and in some circles that may be unpopular, but we've got male and female throughout the entire animal kingdom. Every duckbill platypus, every moose, every panda bear, every bird, pretty much everything, there's a male and a female. And depending on the animal, maybe most of the time the female takes a dominant role, sometimes it's a male. I would put that a little in the creative license of the creator to provide some things like that. Just hey, look, in this case the male takes additional roles or whatever. um but nonetheless, you have adult animals and adult people that nurture children, nurture other their young to adulthood, and instill in them behaviors. I've seen a mother cat with a kitten that got too close to me, and she swatted at the cat and screamed at the cat, basically, get away. Now, that
Yeah.
was a cat that was fairly friendly to me, but still was protecting its young in that instance. And that is the role of parents, is to protect their children from evil, whatever form that may take, and make them prepare them for being on their own. And whether that's a cat or that's person, you still need to have them have skills, have knowledge, so that they can do what they're supposed to do as an adult. And when you break up the family, then you don't have those nurturing roles. When parents are abusive to their kids, or they are just checked out and not part of their kids' lives, I think that's a form of abuse too, to simply be unavailable to raise your own children. And we put things under the guise of mental health. Oh, well, that person, they're suffering from depression or bipolar or whatever that may be. um, but there's still personal responsibility. If that bipolar person plans out a murder and executes it, they're going to go to jail, and they might get the death penalty or life in prison. It doesn't matter if they have some kind of mental health issue. And those things can be overcome, if someone wants to overcome them, in a lot of cases.
And this is something that's just plain, and it just fits to what we're talking about right now. A lot of people don't. We all have our opinions of what's right and what's wrong, and
Hmm.
oh, that's clearly not right, and I don't believe that. But you're making those decisions. But when you use the word of God to make your decisions, it's black and white. I mean, it's like, okay, you want to see if let's say gender neutrality and all this other stuff, the things that are coming out that I never even dreamed of when I was a kid, that are coming out now.
Hmm.
Well, who's leading this movement? Like, where is this written in the Bible? Where is this at? And all you have to do is go to the book of Genesis, and you see one man, one woman, one flesh, children. If
Yep.
it goes against that, if it breaks that up, then it's not of God,
Right.
because God clearly made it that way.
And
So I mean,
not only that, but throughout the animal kingdom, you have male and female, from bugs up to elephants. You need a male
yeah,
and a female. There's no such thing as a non-binary rhinoceros. That's that it's not even a thing. It makes me think of a documentary that was done by the Daily Wire called "What Is a Woman?" And the guy who did it, um, Matt Walsh, I think is his name. He went to Africa, and he talked to people there, and he said, "Hey, um, can a woman become a man?" And they all laughed at him. They
of course they
busted
do.
a gut laughing at him, because that's such a ridiculous concept. And he said, "Well, what is a woman?" And he said, "Well, she's got this type of genitalia, and she's able to bear children." It was very cut and dry. And that's exactly how it is throughout animals, from lions and tigers to giraffes and gazelles and everything else. It's pretty obvious. So anyone who's telling it, well, so someone could be this gender, or they could be, well, no, no.
You,
You can claim you're a cat. You, Chuck, can say, I feel like I'm a cat now. But we know what a cat is. And we don't have to be a cat to know what a cat is, any more than we have to be a woman to know what a woman is. And yeah, sure, some people are going to say that's controversial. You can be controversial and right, and you can be controversial and wrong. And the
yeah,
very laws of nature speak out against the idea of anything other than male and female, mother and father. And biblically speaking, that a mother and a father, they bear children. I mean, not even biblically, it's nature too. But they bear children, they raise a family, they raise them with their beliefs. And I think it's very important that we do that to the best of our ability with our kids. The older they get, the more of a mind they have, the more they may make wrong decisions. And that's something they have to live with. As long as you've put in the groundwork to get them there, they have at least a solid foundation and probably a good relationship with you. So if they do make mistakes, they do goof up, okay, well, let's talk about that. What could you do differently? You can continue that relationship long into adulthood, but you cultivate it when they're very young, and you keep it going.
yes. And also, I mean, I saw this growing up, and it was pretty blatantly obvious to me, back in the day.
Hmm.
We're talking like 90s, you know. Um, we used to get together and eat dinner in front of the TV as a family,
Yeah.
and we would always watch whatever was on when we were done making dinner, and it usually turned out to be The Simpsons. And the funny part about The Simpsons was that Homer, the father figure,
Hmm.
was less than a father figure, and that and it was very amusing because he was the fat, bald, out of shape guy.
Right.
And what was very funny was that Marge was his wife, and Marjorie is my mother's name. So my dad used to laugh pretty hard at what Homer did, and everybody does. But what that started was this. I don't know if the Simpsons started it, but whatever started that movement, then you had the Bundys, and you had all these other shows where the
Oh
guy
yeah,
was like
married. Hmm.
married with children, yeah. And it all downplayed the father, and it was like, oh, the wives are the ones that are smarter, bigger, better, faster, and the guy was the he was the one that was chosen for some reason.
Yeah, he's the
And
slacker.
yeah, he's the slacker, and he's the one, and he's supposed to drink beer and fall asleep in front of the TV while mom
Right.
does the rest of it. So I mean, with and if it was the other way, where we were downgrading the female's role in the family, and she was the slacker, always doing this and always doing that. Well, you're downplaying one side to the other, and they're a team. So I mean,
Yeah.
any team that doesn't play together isn't going to win anything. So I definitely can see it going on today.
Hmm. It's unfortunate. I mean, some people say, well, it is what it is, but what can you do in your own sphere? I mean, that's a big, that's probably the underpinnings of what we're doing here with Foraging Truth is what can you do within your own sphere of influence, in psychology world, sphere of influence, what's around you that's within your grasp, your locus of control is another statement, and that's going to be your spouse, your kids, maybe close friends, neighbors, coworkers, things like that. Don't worry about what's going on overseas. I mean, sure, that may be catastrophic for a lot of people there, but what are you doing in your own backyard? Jordan Peterson makes a great point that if you can't keep your own room in order, your own bedroom, you can't make your bed in the morning, you shouldn't be concerned with issues that affect the entire world. That's too far beyond what you are actually doing now. Make your bed, clean up your room, make breakfast, then decide, okay, what am I going to do now?
Yeah, or yourself. What can you control? Let's control ourselves. Like today's
Oh yeah.
immorality we were talking about.
Hmm.
The first thing that you can control is you. And if you can't control you, that's the first thing you need to gain control of.
Yeah.
And once you gain control of you, then you might be able to get your wife and your children functioning as a unit. And once you
Yes.
start functioning as a unit, then you might be able to help your neighbor if they're
Right.
having problems. But until you
Yeah.
get your situation figured out, who are you helping really? I
Yeah.
mean, so I
and
guess
and
that's the
in
whole. I was going to
yeah
say, I
I
guess that's the whole remove the board from your eye before you remove the splinter from your neighbor's eye kind of thought process.
yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
exactly. And as far as removing your own board, if you're having a problem with a coworker, say you're a guy and she's a female or vice versa, and you feel like that's a bad situation, get out, find a new job. If you gotta move, whatever you gotta do. You want
Isn't there a
you
verse? Isn't there a verse about that? I
Yeah,
believe that's the only sin that's listed in the Bible. I believe, if you can check on that, that you are supposed to flee from. You're supposed to run from it. That doesn't mean
yeah,
like walk around it or you know or let it exist next to you, and then you might not do it. But if that's like the one we're supposed to flee from.
That was Joseph in in the Old Testament, Genesis chapter 39. Um, he was working for Potiphar, who was one of Pharaoh's employees in Egypt, and she was a loose woman. She ran around with everybody, and she took a liking to Joseph, and he was not interested, and so she got to the point where she sent away all the other all the other work or all the other helpers, servants, sent him out of the house, go to wherever. And she tried to put moves on him, and he ran, and as he ran, she didn't want to let go of his clothing, and he left his clothing behind. Now he ended up getting thrown in jail anyways, but at least he did not commit adultery, he didn't sin. But here he is running down the street naked. So, I mean, what I'd
Hey,
imagine that became that was a trending thing in Egypt. That would have been trending if they had Twitter or Facebook. They would have been talking about this guy, running
they
down the street naked, and then she made up a story about how he put moves on her, and she wasn't interested. And that it
I'm
is what
sure
it
that never
is.
goes on. I'm sure that never goes on today,
No, of course not.
one
What?
way,
What?
one way or the other.
Yeah. So
So times have not changed very much.
no, in a lot of ways they haven't. I mean, well, what is it Solomon said, and I think it was Ecclesiastes? There's nothing new under the sun, and a lot of
Yes.
people quote that. They don't even know where it comes from. There's nothing new under the sun, and that here we are. Here we are. It's another proof of that text from over 2,000 years ago, maybe 2,500, even 3,000 years ago.
Yeah.
I
In
don't
that
remember
ballpark.
exactly when it was written. Yeah, I don't remember exactly when it was written, but it was a long time ago, that's for sure.
So with
Yeah.
nothing new being under the sun, the only thing I could say that was different back then that I kind of wish that we would have today would be like not having all this technology and not having some of these great things that we have, because you would be closer to each individual of your life. Like I think we were
Hmm.
just talking about mourning, and the Jewish tradition back then
Right.
was an entire mourning. Like you were going to mourn the loss of your loved one, and it was tearing your clothes and ashes, and you were mourning. And you went through, I believe we were just talking about all these levels of grief that you're supposed to go through. And today we
Right.
really don't do that. We hold on to everything.
Yeah, and some people will hold on to every scrap of clothing from a loved one. They will hold on to everything that their loved one had. I mean, even down to the point of letting, oh, well, they built this little shed back in behind the house, and I just want to remember the way it was. Nah, it's falling down. There's animals living in it. Everything's rotted, everything's rusted, the roof is caved in, but they don't want to tear it down and do anything else with it. They just want to let
There's
it
so
sit
many,
there. And
there's so
yeah,
many
that
different
yeah.
so many different passages come to mind right now that
Right.
just don't even want to open up those can of worms right now.
No.
You know what I mean?
No.
Just like, as far as letting this world be this world. I mean,
Hmm.
we have rust, we have the worms, the everything just breaks down. The solar
Right.
effects from the sun, just, I mean, everything's going to break down. So
Hmm.
it's going to be like at the end of my father's life. You could hold on to all these things, or you could just let it go and just remember what's the most important. And that would be your relationships with the people that you love. And number one, following God. That's
Right.
it. And that's what
Relationship
I
with your
believe that,
creator.
yes. And that, I believe that's the relationship that builds all the other relationships and shows you how to be that that have the unity in your family. that you
Hmm.
need to have. And
Right.
the bedrock is God, and that's it.
Yeah.
So, with saying that, what else do we have today?
We were going to talk about Jesus and weeping, specifically the shortest verse of the Bible. It's John 11:35. Jesus wept. Easy to
That's a good one.
memorize. Easy to
That's
memorize.
a,
And
that's a very good one there.
that's in line with what we were talking about as far as mourning. That and really a lot of cultures probably did this too. It wasn't just the Jews, but they had a pattern to how they mourned, and how they dealt with grief. And so, it says in the passage leading up to that there were a lot of Jews that were with Mary and Martha, who were all mourning the loss of Lazarus, and that Mary and Martha were sisters to Lazarus. He was their brother, and this was a very hard time for them. And so Jesus shows up, and they say to him, if you had been here, our brother wouldn't have died. You could have saved him. And he tells them, your brother will rise again. And he says, they said, well, I know he'll rise in the resurrection on the last day. And he says, well, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live, even though he dies. And everyone who lives in me will never die. Believe this. Of course, he's kind of talking about spiritual death here. He's not just talking about physical death. And that's something to remember when you're looking at scripture, is that sometimes there is an additional meaning, or there's deeper levels of meaning. And in this case, he's not necessarily saying everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Well, clearly the apostles died, Paul died, lots of church
Yeah.
leaders died physically, but they did not endure the second death, the spiritual death. And so they, down in the passage further, Jesus goes to the tomb and says, take away the stone. And their faith wavers a little bit. Say, well, Lord, by now he stinks. It's already been 4 days. This grave is gonna stink terribly. And, he said, did I not? And then he questions them. Did I not tell you, if you believed, you would see the glory of God? Saying, look, you just said that if I was here, he wouldn't have died, and you believe that he will rise again. Okay, so they took away the stone, and then Jesus prayed, and he thanked the Father for hearing him, that acknowledged that the Father always hears him, and
So, could you
he
actually
says,
read that part?
yeah, he says, Father,
The
I
actual
thank
prayer?
you. Yeah, so this is John 11:41 and 42. So they took away the stone. That Jesus lifted his eyes upward and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I say this for the benefit of the people standing here, so that they may believe that you have sent me. And after Jesus had said this, he called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out, or come forth. And the man who had been dead came out with his hands and feet bound in strips of linen. They would have wrapped him all up, think like a mummy, kind of, and
Yeah.
his face wrapped in a cloth. And so they unwrapped him, and he said, unwrap him, let him go. And that's the end of that story, where Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. And
There's definitely a couple things there. There's definitely
oh
a couple
yeah,
things that stand out. Like,
yeah,
okay, so a lot of people would probably get confused about Jesus praying to God when he is God and all that, and that's that whole some things that we have trouble wrapping our heads around, as Christians
right.
sometimes.
Hmm.
But that being the first thing, the second thing is Lazarus come forth. Do you think? I mean, isn't it pretty unique that he called him by name? I mean, I've heard some pastors say, well, if he wouldn't have called him by name and just yelled "come forth," everybody would have came out of their tombs. that, just God's power. I mean, they're just emphasizing God's power.
Yeah,
But
I could see
isn't
that.
that unique? Yeah, isn't that unique? Like,
Hmm.
that's a human thought process, and I can understand that too. Like, you better use his name, because
Yeah,
we don't want the other guys coming out. And then the
and
other thing that stands out is Jesus wept.
mhm.
That part about Jesus wept, that goes into that family that we were talking about. The family, the unity, the two becoming one flesh and children being produced.
And this was three children: Mary, Martha,
Yeah,
and Lazarus.
Lazarus. And the way that they would mourn and openly cry. And
Hmm.
we've talked about this before other days when we were out filming and stuff. A lot of times in our culture, if you're not correcting your children in the right ways and teaching them when to cry, this is something that you should cry about.
Right.
And you could do that by action like my dad did. Like, I didn't know my dad cried until his mother passed away. I
Hmm.
never saw my father cry. And when he did cry, I was like, this is a time to cry. And believe me, there was no holding back at that point. When you see your dad crying, the whole
Oh
family's
yeah,
crying.
yeah.
So, but that masculinity, that masculine man role model, I believe
Hmm.
was good for me. You know, and
Absolutely.
without even realizing it, he taught me that you don't cry about that, because I was probably using my tears as manipulation because I did not get what I wanted at that moment. Like,
Right.
I wanted that and I can't have it. And your dad's like, I'll give you something to cry about.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
a
you're
lot
like,
of
I
things
don't
are.
like that.
Yeah, a lot of things are not worth crying about, and like we had talked about before, that probably 80 or 90% of a kid's crying in their first few years is about manipulation. I'm hungry. I'm tired. Change my diaper. I want that cookie.
Yeah,
Why did he take that toy from me? Why are you sending me to bed? It's about manipulation. I don't want to go to bed yet. I don't want to go to school. And you got to work beyond that and show them, like, these things are not something that you're allowed to cry about. We don't want you to cry about this. Crying is something like anything else. There's an appropriate time and place for it. Whether it's
yes, and
love
that's
or
the
it's
whole.
it's enthusiasm. Sometimes you don't want to be hyper enthusiastic. Oh yeah, this is going to be so great and blah blah, because maybe the person you're talking to gets easily overwhelmed by that enthusiasm.
Yeah,
And
it's
if you
the
approached
whole
with a little more
so.
quietness and tact, they would actually listen to you.
Yeah, it's so intricate, but there's a lot of people out there that would look at a man that has tears in his eyes, crying, and be like,
Hmm.
"Well, you're not a man. You're not a real
Yeah.
man." Some of the men that I've seen cry, I would never say, especially at that moment, that they're not a real man because they're crying.
Right.
And certainly, I would never say that to God on earth. If God in
No.
human form would cry, that's powerful. That preaches by itself. Two words: Jesus wept.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
believe that is one of the most powerful verses in the Bible as far as who God is. You
one of
know,
the one of the proof texts of whether something is true or not, or is the full picture or not, is, are there negative things said, or unbecoming or less than heroic? So you look at some of the ancient Greek mythology, or stories about heroes from ancient times. By and large, what was written by the guys who worked for the head honcho, I don't know, Alexander the Great or anybody like that, they wrote nothing but good stuff. Because if they wrote anything bad, they might get executed for that. So they just wrote good stuff. But when you look in the Bible, you see the failures of some of the key people. David, he had eyes for a married woman, and he had her husband killed. And you look at Samson. I mean, he had some issues too. So many people throughout the Bible had the negative side of their behavior told also. And that leads credence to an accuracy of anything when you have the good and the bad all told at the same time. In this case, getting back to the Jesus wept, that
Mhm.
Jesus being shown as not just this heroic savior, and I'm going to tell you how to get into heaven, but he also had real feelings. And in this case, was grieving the loss of someone that was close to people that he cared about.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think that is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. Next to
Hmm.
Jacob wrestling with the angel of the Lord, which is even more. It's just great. It's just when you really get the context of that, it's powerful. It just
It is.
yeah, and I can't believe people actually out there go, well, life doesn't come with a manual. Well, it actually does. It does.
Yeah, yeah.
life does
We're
come with
looking
a
at it right
how-to.
now.
Yeah, life does come with a how-to manual. It's willing if you are you one that would read the directions, or are you one that skims through them after everything goes wrong? You know what I
Yeah,
mean? I was the one that was. I'm still skimming through. So things
I am too
happen.
sometimes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, so we covered Jesus wept. I think we got a good understanding of this.
yeah.
Why
Now,
don't we talk about
now,
the foraging report?
yeah. Let's get on to the foraging report because Chuck has not been feeling the greatest, and Chuck's starting to feel a little bit better. A
Wonderful.
little bit better when all the tests come back.
Hmm.
But I'm not going to sit and dwell on that. So, what do we have in the foraging report today? And what you're holding there? What do we
Yeah.
have?
Well, this is chicory. Although it's not alive, there's no purple flowers. This sucker is completely dead. If we can get it
Did you
steady for
break
the
that off
camera.
in the yard? Did
Yeah,
you break that off in the yard?
I broke this off about an hour ago, and
You could have done some root out too.
it well, I could have, but this sucker's been growing for about 4 or 5 years, so that root is going to be really bitter. And yeah, sure, bitter is good. Bitter is a taste that we don't find in food in America very often, and that we end up consuming a lot of sugar. If we consumed a lot of bitter food, sugar would taste too sweet. We would crave less of it. It would be good for us.
And
So this would
you'd
be.
be very proud of me right now. I am not drinking this tea with any sweetener in it.
Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Did you know that chicory is one of the bitter herbs that they fix at Passover every year?
I did. We made a video on that actually. You could probably put the
We
link in the
did.
description.
Yes, yes. So I'll put the link in the description for the chicory video. But yeah, this was one of the bitter herbs. It was cultivated as early as we know in Egypt. The earliest books about herbs include chicory, and it appears to grow almost everywhere. Hardiness zones. If you've never looked at hardiness zones, it's basically how cold, how hot, humidity, that sort of thing. The United States, the continental United States, is hardiness zones 3 through 9, and then the southern tip of Florida is hardiness zone 10. So pretty much this will grow anywhere. From what I'm reading, that the protein content of the young plants can be over 30%. Now, protein in a plant, in leaves
Yeah.
and the root, is pretty intense. Um, some say that it has more nutritional value than alfalfa. So if it's got more nutritional value than alfalfa, I don't know. I mean, alfalfa is fairly nutritious. You can sprout alfalfa and eat it. Cattle love it, but cattle love this too, and sheep and goats and pigs and everything else. So
Yeah, I'm surprised.
it's a perennial. So if you're out in the woods and you see a plant that looks like it's got these random flowers coming out and some stems on the sides and everything, there's a good chance it's chicory. And if you were to show up in June or July, you're going to find this, but with purple flowers and green leaves. And you're going to find
Yeah.
more of it. and so
And if
you
you want,
could, yeah,
I was going to say, and if you want to see that, that would be the best time to go ahead after this video, watch our chicory video, and that would show you what the plant looks like with the flowers on, right then
absolutely,
and
and
there,
we'll,
and the root.
yeah, yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about, we talk a little bit of it in that video about how to use it. There's certainly other videos. There's other websites that talk about what to do with chicory, and then you can collect seeds, and since it'll grow almost anywhere. If you sprinkle those seeds along the edge of your property, you got a hillside that you can't do much with. As long as there's good sun and good drainage, it's going to grow, and it's going to come back year after year. And you can pull it up and you cut off the root, make a coffee substitute. You can put the leaves in your salad. If you'd like to celebrate Passover, growing this would be one of the herbs that you would need for that. And it's just an all around pretty hardy plant. And the flowers are beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful. So,
So,
yeah, go.
so what I've got here is lion's mane tea.
Hmm.
And this goes to show you that I did not have any lion's mane left over because I enjoy consuming lion's mane when it's fresh.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
have not made any tea from lion's mane. Now, there is one great effect of lion's mane tea. This tea, lion's mane can actually help you alleviate stress, worry, all of that.
Hmm.
It gives you like a happy, not euphoric, not like a drug feeling, but like you just
Right.
feel less inclined to worry about stuff. And
Hmm.
and that is a good effect of this tea. But can you guess what else is in here, Seth?
I think I can guess. I bet it's chicory root.
It's chicory root. Yep.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
what's this tea good for? Prebiotic. It's acid free and caffeine free, and of course it has the 300 milligrams of lion's mane in it, which does me a lot of good right now. This is actually, my neighbor bought this, and
Yeah.
she asked me about something for stress, and I said, well, lion's mane is really good for stress. Well, she ordered this tea, and she wanted me to try it. So I've been having some issues going on. So, of course, I tried it. And I have to say that I usually put something in it for to sweeten something up. And it's actually
Right.
sweetened with dates. This is actually already sweetened with dates naturally. So, and I had no problems. I sat here and drank the whole cup. And
I'm game for trying it. I'd like to try that.
I have
Uh,
I have about 5 or 6, so I'll keep a couple for you. But
sure.
it's
Well,
actually it's worked really well. Okay, so tonight we talked about immorality in the world. Jesus wept, and we had our foraging report about chicory, and we both had a lot of different feedback for this. But this is basically a normal Christian perspective on the world, the Bible, and how we should be living our lives, and some things that we can use from God's creation to make our lives a little bit easier. Because nobody's life, chicory, but nobody's life is easy. And we all know that the rain's going to fall, it's going to hit everybody. So, with that being said, when the rain falls, it'll be on Seth and me here coming in morel season, right around the corner.
I can't wait. I can't wait. We'll be out in the woods. We'll probably do a podcast or two out in the woods, plus some other foraging videos. So I'm really looking forward to that.
We're going to do a lot more cleaning and prep videos. We're going to be doing a lot more tea making videos. We're going to be doing water extractions, alcohol extractions. We're going to be doing all that from the Grove's kitchen. I think that's going to be pretty cool.
Well, we're going to conclude this podcast for tonight. We thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And we would love to see your comments about what you'd like to see us cover in the next one. Make sure that you check out our Teespring store. We've got some really gnarly shirts and hoodies and stuff like that in there. And without further ado, Chuck?
Keep foraging, guys.
Absolutely. We'll see ya.